To understand China today, you have to go back thousands of years, long before modern cities, global trade, or political tensions. You have to imagine a vast land shaped by powerful rivers, high mountains, dry deserts, and wide open plains. China did not begin as one country. It began as small farming communities trying to survive in a challenging environment. The Yellow River played a central role in early Chinese life. It provided rich soil for agriculture, but it also flooded without warning. Entire villages could disappear overnight. Because of this, early communities learned something important. Survival required cooperation. Building flood controls, organizing harvests, and storing food demanded collective effort. From the beginning, Chinese civilization valued order and coordination. Over time, these early settlements developed into organized states. The earliest dynasties mixed legend and history. Stories speak of wise rulers who brought peace through moral strength. Whether fully historical or partly symbolic, these stories show that leadership in China was always connected to responsibility. A ruler was expected to maintain harmony between heaven, earth, and society. By around 1600 BC, during the Shang dynasty, China had developed bronze technology, organized armies, and an early writing system. Kings used oracle bones to ask questions about harvests, wars, and the future. The symbols carved into those bones slowly evolved into Chinese characters. This writing system created something powerful: continuity. Even thousands of years later, modern Chinese writing still connects back to these ancient symbols. Around 1046 BC, the Zhou dynasty replaced the Shang. The Zhou introduced one of the most influential ideas in Chinese political thought: the mandate of heaven. According to this belief, heaven gave a ruler the right to govern. But that right was not permanent. If a ruler became corrupt or failed to protect the people, heaven would withdraw its support. Natural disasters, famine, and rebellion were seen as signs that the mandate had been lost. This idea shaped Chinese history for over 2,000 years. Dynasties rose, ruled successfully for generations, then weakened and collapsed. But each new dynasty claimed that heaven had chosen them. The state could fall, but the civilization endured. As Zhou power declined, China entered the Warring States period. Different regions fought constantly for dominance. It was an age of warfare, political instability, and uncertainty. Yet it was also one of the most intellectually creative periods in Chinese history. Philosophers tried to answer one urgent question: how can society avoid chaos? Confucius argued that social order begins with moral behavior. Leaders must act with virtue. Families must practice respect. Society must value education and ethical responsibility. His ideas did not promise personal freedom. They promised stability through proper relationships. Another philosophy, legalism, argued that people are naturally selfish. Only strict laws and harsh punishment can maintain order. In times of crisis, kindness is weakness. Taoism offered a different view. It suggested that too much control creates imbalance. Leaders should govern with restraint and align with the natural flow of life. These ideas deeply influenced Chinese governance for centuries. In 221 BC, the Qin state defeated its rivals and unified China under a single emperor for the first time. The Qin ruler standardized weights, measures, currency, and even the writing system. Massive infrastructure projects were built, including early defensive walls in the north. Political unity had finally been achieved, but the Qin ruled harshly. Laws were strict, dissent was punished, and forced labor exhausted the population. After the emperor's death, rebellion spread quickly. The Han dynasty replaced Qin in 206 BC and ruled for over 4 centuries. The Han blended strong central authority with Confucian moral principles. Government officials were selected based on knowledge and education. Trade expanded along routes that connected China to Central Asia and beyond, later known as the Silk Road. By the time the Han dynasty ended in AD 220, China had already established many of the structures that would define it for centuries: centralized government, a professional bureaucracy, philosophical traditions, and a strong cultural identity. After the Han dynasty collapsed in AD 220, China entered a long period of division. Regional warlords fought for control. Kingdoms rose and fell quickly. For ordinary people, this meant instability and hardship. But something important survived: the shared cultural foundation. The writing system, Confucian teachings, and the idea of China as a unified civilization continued even without political unity. Centuries later, in AD 581, the Sui dynasty reunified China. Although the Sui ruled briefly, they rebuilt central authority and began constructing the Grand Canal, connecting northern and southern regions. This massive project strengthened economic unity and improved communication across the empire. The Tang dynasty followed in AD 618 and is often considered one of China's greatest golden ages. During the Tang period, China was confident, wealthy, and open to the outside world. The capital city became one of the largest and most international cities on Earth. Traders, diplomats, and travelers arrived from Central Asia, India, and the Middle East. Buddhism expanded widely, influencing art and culture. Poetry flourished. Technology advanced. China during the Tang era was not isolated. It was connected and outward-looking. But internal rebellion and border pressure eventually weakened the Tang state. Once again, China fragmented. The Song dynasty emerged in AD 960. Unlike earlier dynasties, the Song focused heavily on economic growth, education, and innovation. This period saw remarkable technological progress, improvements in printing, navigation, engineering, and commerce. Paper money was introduced. Urban life expanded. The civil service examination system became central to government, allowing educated men to serve based on merit rather than birth. This strengthened the idea that order came from education and structured administration. However, the Song struggled militarily. In the 13th century, the Mongols conquered China and established the Yuan dynasty in AD 1271. For the first time, China was ruled entirely by non-Chinese leaders. The Mongols maintained many Chinese institutions, but placed themselves at the top of society. Their vast empire connected China to Europe and the Middle East more directly than ever before. Trade expanded across Eurasia. Still, resentment grew. In 1368, Chinese forces overthrew Mongol rule and established the Ming dynasty. The Ming restored native rule and emphasized stability and strength. Early Ming rulers expanded the navy and sent massive fleets across the Indian Ocean. Chinese ships reached Southeast Asia, India, and East Africa. These voyages demonstrated China's technological power. But after these expeditions, the Ming government gradually reduced overseas exploration and focused more on internal stability and defense. The Great Wall was reinforced to guard against northern threats. In the 17th century, internal problems and rebellion weakened the Ming. In AD 1644, the Manchus entered Beijing and founded the Qing dynasty. The Qing rulers adopted many Chinese traditions while maintaining their own identity. Under the Qing, China expanded territorially and reached significant population growth. For a time, it saw itself as the stable center of the world. However, in the 19th century, industrialized Western powers began to pressure China. The Opium Wars in the mid-1800s exposed military weaknesses. Unequal treaties forced China to open ports and grant privileges to foreign nations. Sovereignty was weakened. Internal rebellions erupted, causing massive destruction. By the early 20th century, the imperial system that had lasted for over 2,000 years collapsed. In 1911, the Qing dynasty fell, and China declared itself a republic. When the Qing dynasty collapsed in 1911, it ended more than 2,000 years of imperial rule. But the fall of the emperor did not immediately create stability. Instead, China entered a long and painful struggle to redefine itself in the modern world. The new Republic of China faced enormous challenges. Regional warlords controlled different territories. The central government was weak. Foreign powers still held economic influence in key cities. Many Chinese intellectuals believed that the country had fallen behind because it had failed to modernize fast enough. Others believed China had lost its strength because it had abandoned its traditions. This tension between tradition and modernization became one of the defining struggles of modern Chinese history. In the 1920s and 1930s, two major political forces emerged: the nationalists and the communists. At first, they cooperated to unify the country, but soon they turned against each other, beginning a brutal civil war. In the middle of this internal conflict, China faced another devastating invasion. In 1937, Japan launched a full-scale invasion of China. The war was brutal, Cities were destroyed. Civilians suffered enormously. Millions died. The invasion forced the nationalists and communists into an uneasy alliance, but mistrust remained. When World War II ended in 1945, the Civil War resumed almost immediately. By 1949, the Communist Party, led by Mao Zedong, had defeated the nationalists. The People's Republic of China was officially established. The nationalist government retreated to Taiwan, creating a political division that still shapes global tensions today. Under Mao, China entered a radical new phase. The communist government aimed to transform society completely. Land was redistributed, private property was limited, industry was reorganized under state control. The goal was equality and rapid modernization. Some changes brought improvements, especially in literacy and basic healthcare, but other campaigns led to disaster. The Great Leap Forward, launched in 1958, attempted to industrialize the country at extreme speed. Poor planning and unrealistic targets led to famine on a massive scale. Millions died. It was one of the worst human tragedies of the 20th century. In 1966, Mao launched the Cultural Revolution. This movement aimed to remove what he saw as old ideas and enemies within society. Schools closed, historical artifacts were destroyed, intellectuals were persecuted, social trust broke down. For nearly a decade, political chaos disrupted daily life. When Mao died in 1976, China stood exhausted but not broken. Once again, the country faced a familiar question: how to restore order after chaos. A new leader, Deng Xiaoping, took a different approach. Instead of strict ideological control over the economy, Deng introduced reforms that allowed limited market activity. Farmers could sell surplus crops. Foreign investment was encouraged. Special economic zones were created along the coast. These reforms changed China dramatically. Factories multiplied, cities expanded. Millions of people moved from rural areas to urban centers. Over the next 4 decades, China experienced one of the fastest economic transformations in human history. Hundreds of millions were lifted out of poverty. Infrastructure grew at a scale rarely seen before. High-speed rail networks, modern highways, and massive cities reshaped the landscape. At the same time, the political system remained tightly controlled. The Communist Party did not give up authority. Stability was seen as essential. Leaders studied history carefully. They believed that chaos had repeatedly weakened China in the past. Unity and order were considered necessary to prevent national humiliation. By the early 21st century, China was no longer a developing country struggling to recover. It had become a global power. It was the world's manufacturing center. It expanded its military capabilities. It invested heavily in technology, artificial intelligence, and global infrastructure projects. Its influence reached Africa, Latin America, Europe, and beyond. For the United States, this rise created a new strategic reality. For decades, China had been viewed primarily as a partner in trade. But as its economic and technological strength grew, so did competition. Trade disputes intensified. Concerns about supply chains, semiconductor production, cybersecurity, and military expansion became central topics in Washington. Taiwan remains one of the most sensitive issues. From Beijing's perspective, Taiwan is a part of China that must eventually be reunified. From the perspective of the United States, Taiwan represents both a democratic partner and a strategic position in Asia. This unresolved situation creates ongoing tension. But to understand modern China, it is important to look beyond headlines. Chinese leadership often sees the present through the lens of history. The memory of foreign invasion in the 19th century is still powerful. The idea of restoring national dignity influences policy decisions. The fear of internal fragmentation shapes domestic governance. For thousands of years, China experienced cycles of unity and division. Each time it fractured, the consequences were severe. Each time it reunited, stability became the highest priority. Today's China reflects that long memory. It combines ancient ideas of centralized authority with modern technology and global ambition. It seeks strength, security, and recognition on the world stage. Whether one views China as competitor, partner, or rival, one thing is clear. It is not a sudden phenomenon. It is the result of 4,000 years of cultural continuity, political adaptation, and survival through crisis. The story of China is not simply the story of a rising power. It is the story of a civilization that has repeatedly fallen into chaos and rebuilt itself, again and again, and the next chapter is still being written.